morning was colder than usual, and a soft layer of frost covered the sidewalk outside the little cafe. Steam rose from the coffee machines inside, filling the air with a warm, inviting smell. The bell above the door jingled now and then as a few early customers walked in, trying to escape the cold. Everyone moved quickly, focused on their own cups of coffee or their smartphones, not really noticing anything else. She was behind the counter, arranging pastries in the display case and taking orders with a polite smile. She liked mornings like this because they felt calm before the busy rush. But today something caught her eye. A man stood just outside the door, hunched over, trying to warm his hands in his coat pockets. His shoulders shook, and his breath came out in little clouds that disappeared into the cold air. He looked cold, tired, and a little lost. Most people would have passed by, or maybe given a quick glance before going about their day. But she felt something pull her attention toward him. There was no hesitation. She nodded to herself, wiping her hands on her apron, and stepped toward the door. "Would you like to come in and have something warm?" she asked gently. The man looked surprised, his eyes wide for a moment, like he hadn't expected anyone to speak to him. He shook his head slightly, but she could see the hesitation, the way he looked at the steaming cups of coffee behind the counter, the fresh pastries, and the soft chairs where people were sitting comfortably. She smiled, trying to make the offer feel natural. "It's on the house," she added. "Just come in and warm up for a bit." For a moment he seemed unsure. Pride and embarrassment were visible on his face. But the cold was too strong, and the smell of warm food and coffee was too inviting. Slowly, he opened the door and stepped inside. The warmth hit him immediately, and he drew in a deep breath as if the heat itself was comforting. She guided him to a small table near the window, where the morning sunlight peeked through the glass. "Sit there. I'll bring you something hot to eat," she said, keeping her tone kind but casual. There was no judgment, no questions, only a genuine concern for his comfort. He sat down quietly, still fidgeting a little with his gloves, his eyes scanning the room. She could see he wasn't used to this attention, but she didn't push him. She went back behind the counter, quickly preparing a plate with eggs, toast, and some fresh fruit. She made a cup of tea, adding just enough honey to make it soothing. As she walked to his table, she placed the plate and cup gently in front of him. "Here, eat slowly. Take your time." The man looked down at the food, and for the first time, his shoulders relaxed slightly. He murmured a quiet thank you, almost more to himself than to her. She nodded, smiling, and stepped back to give him space. She returned to her counter, continuing her work, but she kept an eye on him. It felt strange to watch someone eat, but she didn't want him to feel rushed or uncomfortable. Other customers came in, talking to each other and ordering their drinks. No one seemed to notice the man, except for a few who glanced his way and whispered among themselves. She ignored it all. The important thing was that he had a warm meal in front of him and a place to sit. The man ate slowly, carefully, almost savoring each bite. His hands shook a little, and she noticed the worn patches on his coat and shoes. But he didn't complain. He didn't ask for anything else. He simply ate quietly, letting the warmth from the food spread through him. After he finished, he pushed the plate away gently. She walked over with a small cloth, clearing the table. "Are you feeling better?" she asked softly. He nodded, his lips curling into a small smile. There was a gratitude in his eyes that didn't need words. He didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't awkward. There was a calm understanding between them. Before he left, she placed a cup of water and a small pastry in a bag for him. "Take this with you. It's cold outside and you might need it," she said. Again, there was no expectation, no lecture, no questions about why he was out in the cold. Just care. He looked at her, almost hesitating, like he wanted to say something more. Finally, he whispered, "Thank you," and nodded before walking out the door. She watched him step into the morning frost, disappearing down the street. She didn't know where he was going, or what his story was, but she felt good knowing she had helped him in some small way. The cafe returned to its usual rhythm. Orders were taken, coffee was poured, and pastries were sold. Life went on, but something in the air felt lighter, warmer, as if that small act of kindness had left a trace behind. She didn't think about reward or recognition. It was enough to see someone leave with a little more warmth than when they had arrived. Later, as she washed the counter and prepared for the next rush of customers, she found herself glancing toward the door from time to time. She wondered about the man, where he had come from and where he would go. But mostly, she hoped he stayed safe and warm. In her mind, that was enough. A simple act, a small meal, and a few moments of comfort. Sometimes that was all a person needed to feel human again. The morning went on, and the cafe grew busier. The memory of the man stayed with her, a quiet reminder that kindness was never wasted, even if it went unnoticed. She continued serving her customers, smiling, and offering warmth in whatever way she could, knowing that every small action had the power to make a difference. And somewhere out there, the man walked on with a little more hope, carrying the memory of a stranger who had given him a moment of true care in the middle of a cold morning. After leaving the cafe, the elderly man walked slowly down the frosty sidewalk. The warmth from the meal spread through his body, making him feel light in a way he hadn't felt for a long time. Every step was careful, yet there was a subtle spring in his movement. He kept glancing back at the cafe, not because he wanted to linger, but because he wanted to remember the warmth of that small place and the kindness of the young woman who worked there. He walked past the busy streets, ignoring the cars and the hurried people, thinking about how different life could feel when someone simply cared. It was strange, he thought, how the smallest gesture could leave such a deep mark. The breakfast she had given him wasn't expensive or fancy. It was just food and a cup of tea, yet it carried something far more important: attention, respect, and kindness. As he continued down the street, he noticed a few people giving him small glances. Some nodded politely, some hurried past, lost in their own lives. He realized he had become invisible in the everyday rush of the city. But in that cafe, for a few moments, he felt seen. That feeling lingered with him, stronger than he expected. He turned a corner and entered a small, quiet building tucked away behind the main street. It was well kept, but simple, with minimal decoration. He went inside, greeted the receptionist briefly, and took the elevator to a higher floor. The building was quiet and professional, and people seemed to know him, yet treated him with normal courtesy. No one acted like he was important, and that suited him. That was the kind of life he had chosen after years of being in the public eye. He had stepped away from recognition, from the constant attention, to live more simply and observe life from a different angle. Once inside his office, he took a moment to sit and think. He thought about the young woman in the cafe and the generosity she had shown without expecting anything in return. It wasn't common to see such acts of pure kindness, especially in a world that often rewarded status, wealth, and influence. He was reminded of why he had started giving back in the first place. Not for fame, not for recognition, but because acts of compassion made the world better, even in small ways. He opened a small drawer in his desk and pulled out a notebook. It was filled with names, addresses, and notes, people he had helped over the years, some he had met, some he hadn't. He added a new entry: the cafe and its young worker. He wrote a few lines about the incident, how simple it was, yet how meaningful. He made a note to remember it for future action, something that would quietly show gratitude, without making her uncomfortable or putting her on display. This wasn't about reward. It was about recognition of character. He thought about how easy it was to ignore people who struggled, how society often turned a blind eye to those who needed warmth, food, or a kind word. He reflected on his own life, how he had once been shielded by wealth and status, and how those things didn't always protect someone from loneliness or vulnerability. Seeing her act of kindness had reminded him that real human connection mattered more than anything else. He picked up his phone and made a few calls. Quietly, efficiently, he arranged for a small team to look into the cafe, just enough to understand its needs, its daily life, and the kind of person who ran it. It was important to him to know that his gratitude would be meaningful and not intrusive. He wanted to ensure that any help he offered in the future would be practical, and that it would honor the effort and heart of the young woman who had served him that morning. Hours passed as he worked, thinking about all the ways kindness shaped his own experiences. Even now, after years of wealth and influence, he realized that a single thoughtful act could touch a person deeply. That breakfast, a simple meal with a cup of tea, had reminded him of the humanity that sometimes gets lost in the daily grind. He felt a quiet happiness knowing he had witnessed something authentic. Meanwhile, back at the cafe, life continued as usual. The staff went about their work, customers came and went, and the small shop hummed with the soft sounds of morning life. She didn't know that the man had returned to a life of influence and decision-making, that he had already begun thinking about ways to support her and the cafe. To her, it was just a part of her day, a small act done out of instinct, not knowing the ripple it would create. Throughout the morning, she found herself glancing out the window, imagining where he had gone, and hoping he stayed warm. She didn't expect any recognition or reward. Her satisfaction came from seeing him comfortable, from knowing she had offered something important that didn't have a price tag. It was simple, human, and real. The elderly man's mind wandered back to the cafe repeatedly that day. He thought about the smile on her face, the gentle tone in her voice, and the unspoken respect she showed. It was a reminder of what he valued most. People who acted without expectation, who offered care because it was the right thing to do. He knew that these rare encounters were worth remembering, worth acting on, and that sometimes, these small connections could change more than one life. As the afternoon sun moved across the sky, he made a decision. He would ensure that her generosity and character were quietly acknowledged. He would not make a show of it, nor would he turn it into a spectacle. It was about honoring the simple, human act that had reminded him of the goodness still present in the world. And perhaps, in doing so, he could inspire others in small ways, reinforcing the importance of kindness, humility, and quiet generosity. He leaned back in his chair, thinking about how many people had passed by that morning without noticing him, without noticing anyone else. He realized that her attention, though small, had made a significant impact. It was a reminder that life is shaped not only by grand gestures but by the small, thoughtful choices made every day. The warmth she had offered was more than food. It was dignity, respect, and compassion. As the day turned toward evening, he made another note to himself. He wanted to find a way to connect again, but only in a way that would feel natural and welcome, not intrusive or overwhelming. He valued her independence, her humility, and her ability to act from the heart. He wanted to honor that without altering the essence of her daily life. For the rest of the day, he moved through his own world with a quiet contentment. He knew that he had experienced a reminder of something that money and status could never buy. And somewhere in the city, a young woman continued her day at the cafe, unaware of the impact she had already made on a life that had once been full of challenges, expectations, and the constant weight of responsibility. The elderly man smiled quietly to himself, thinking about how the smallest acts could have far-reaching effects. He understood now more than ever that kindness given without expectation creates connections that matter. It builds trust, respect, and a sense of shared humanity. And in that simple morning at the cafe, he had witnessed one of the most profound gestures of his life, a reminder that goodness can be found in the most ordinary places, in the hands of ordinary people who choose to care. As night fell, he prepared to rest, feeling a sense of anticipation for the next day. He didn't know what would happen next, but he was certain that the morning at the cafe would remain with him, quietly shaping his thoughts and actions in ways that would unfold in the days to come. He had witnessed a moment that was small yet powerful, a quiet act that spoke louder than words, and it reminded him that true kindness is timeless and invaluable. The next morning, the cafe opened just as usual. The soft smell of fresh coffee and baked bread welcomed the few early customers who had come in to escape the cold. She was behind the counter, tying her apron and arranging the pastries in the display case, humming softly to herself. It was another ordinary day, or so it seemed. As she prepared the first orders of the morning, she noticed a quiet tension outside. The street had been calm when she arrived, but now something unusual caught her attention. 3 black SUVs had stopped right in front of the cafe. Their polished surfaces reflected the rising sun, and the darkly tinted windows made it impossible to see inside. The vehicles were large, imposing, and completely out of place in the small neighborhood. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what to expect. Maybe there was an inspection, maybe some kind of complaint, or perhaps a local issue. She glanced at the other staff members, who were equally confused. A few customers who had just come in stopped in their tracks, looking out the window with curiosity and unease. The SUV's doors opened slowly, and several men stepped out, dressed neatly in dark suits. They moved with purpose, not aggressively, but with an unmistakable authority. Their calm presence only made the situation feel more tense. One of them approached the door and asked politely, yet firmly, for her by name. She froze for a moment, unsure if she should respond. Her mind raced through possibilities. Who could be looking for her? Why now? She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped closer to the man. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" she asked. The man nodded and gestured for her to step outside. As she did, the cold morning air hit her, and the contrast between the warmth of the cafe and the chill outside made her shiver slightly. She noticed the curious eyes of the few customers and staff, but no one said anything. They, too, seemed to sense that something extraordinary was happening. Before she could ask any questions, another figure approached from one of the SUVs. It was the elderly man from the day before. He looked just as simple, just as modest, wearing the same worn coat. But there was a quiet presence about him now, a calm confidence that she hadn't noticed before. He smiled gently, the same warm smile from yesterday, and nodded toward her. "Good morning," he said softly. "I hope you remember me." She blinked, surprised but relieved. "Yes, of course," she replied, though her voice carried a mix of curiosity and confusion. I didn't expect to see you again so soon." He gestured toward the SUVs and the men who had come with him. "I wanted to come by personally," he said, his tone calm and sincere. "There's something I need to show you." Her curiosity grew, but she stayed cautious. She had no idea what to expect. The staff and a few remaining customers watched quietly, sensing that this was no ordinary morning. He led her toward the first SUV, motioning for her to step aside while the men opened the trunk. Inside were carefully packed supplies, food ingredients, kitchen equipment, and other items that could help the cafe run smoothly. There were even notes, politely explaining how the items could be used to improve daily operations. The young woman's eyes widened. I don't understand," she said softly. "Why would you do this?" "I didn't expect anything. I was just trying to help." He shook his head gently. "That's exactly why. You helped without expecting anything in return. That act of kindness mattered to me, and I wanted to honor it in a way that could make your work easier and your cafe more comfortable for you and your customers." She felt a rush of emotions: gratitude, surprise, and a touch of disbelief. She had never imagined that a small act of giving a meal could lead to something like this. Her heart swelled with warmth, not from the gifts themselves, but from the recognition of her effort, her care, and her human decency. The men in suits quietly arranged the supplies inside the cafe, placing each item carefully where it would be most useful. The elderly man stayed nearby, watching with a soft smile. He didn't make a spectacle of the situation, didn't demand attention. He simply wanted her to see that her small gesture had not gone unnoticed, that it had a ripple effect she could not yet fully understand. Other customers, who had been observing the scene with wide eyes, whispered among themselves. The cafe had become a place of fascination, but she focused only on the man in front of her and the meaning behind his visit. There was no fear, no intimidation, only a quiet acknowledgement of kindness. He spoke again, his voice calm but deliberate. "I know you didn't do this for recognition or reward. That's why I wanted to come myself, to make sure you understood how much your gesture meant. Kindness like yours is rare, and it deserves respect." She nodded, feeling tears welling in her eyes, though she tried to blink them back. I didn't do it for anything," she said. "I just saw someone who needed help. That's all." He smiled, a gentle, understanding smile. "And that's exactly why it mattered. You acted with your heart, not for anything else." That's what makes this meaningful. The staff and remaining customers began to understand that this wasn't an ordinary visit. The air in the cafe shifted from curiosity to quiet admiration. People saw a simple truth. Genuine care has power beyond expectation. After a few moments, he gestured for her to look at the windows. Through the glass, she saw the busy street, people rushing past, unaware of the small, meaningful moment unfolding inside. It was a reminder that ordinary life goes on, but extraordinary gestures leave lasting impressions. He spent some time talking quietly with her about the supplies, offering gentle advice and suggestions, never overwhelming her or making her feel uncomfortable. His tone was patient, considerate, and respectful. There was no sense of superiority, no need to show off his influence. It was clear that he had come only to honor her action and ensure that her cafe benefited from it in a practical way. As the morning progressed, the men in suits finished their work and stepped back. The elderly man turned to her one last time before leaving. "Thank you for reminding me of something very important," he said. "Sometimes the smallest acts have the biggest impact. I hope you continue to bring warmth to the people who come here, just as you brought warmth to me." She nodded, speechless, feeling a deep sense of connection and gratitude. Watching him leave, she realized that life often surprises us in ways we can't predict. A simple decision to offer kindness could create a ripple effect, reaching places she could never imagine. The SUVs drove away, leaving a quiet, almost magical calm in their wake. The cafe, now filled with the gentle warmth of both the morning sun and a powerful act of recognition, felt different. Everything seemed brighter, more meaningful, and alive with the promise that small acts of humanity can truly make a difference. She returned to her duties, arranging pastries and taking orders, but the memory of the morning stayed with her. It was more than a lesson. It was a reminder that being kind, compassionate, and genuine can change lives, sometimes in ways that only become clear later. And somewhere out there, the man she had helped continued his own day, carrying with him a quiet satisfaction that human kindness still exists and matters more than anything else. By the middle of the day, the cafe had returned to its usual rhythm. Customers came and went, sipping coffee, chatting softly, and enjoying pastries. She moved behind the counter with her usual energy, taking orders and serving drinks, but her mind kept drifting back to the morning's unexpected events. It was hard to believe how quickly things had changed in just a few hours, and she still struggled to understand the full impact of the elderly man's visit. As she cleared a table, she noticed a familiar figure waiting patiently outside the door. The man she had helped a few days ago was standing there, accompanied by the same professional-looking assistants. There was no rush in his movement, no grand announcement, just the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what he wanted. She stepped outside, curious, and greeted him cautiously. "Good afternoon," he said softly. "I hope it's all right that I came by again." She nodded, still unsure what to expect. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady but curious. "What brings you back here today?" He smiled gently, his eyes reflecting a warmth that made her feel immediately at ease. "I wanted to show you something. It's not just about the cafe supplies from earlier. There's something more important I'd like you to understand." He led her inside the cafe, motioning for her to look around. The staff and remaining customers sensed the importance of the moment and gave them space. He explained quietly that his visits weren't about recognition or reward for himself, but about acknowledging the genuine kindness she had shown. He wanted her to understand how her simple act had touched him deeply and reminded him of the goodness that still exists in people. She listened, feeling a mixture of surprise and humility. "I didn't do it for anything," she said. "I just saw someone who needed help. That's all." He nodded, understanding completely. "And that is exactly why it matters. You acted without expectation, and that makes your action rare and meaningful. It's easy to overlook small gestures, but they often carry the greatest weight." He then explained that he had spent the morning making arrangements to ensure that the cafe would have long-term support. He introduced her to a small team of assistants who had come to observe and learn more about her work. The assistants were polite, professional and careful not to interfere, but they had a clear mission: to ensure that her kindness and the cafe itself were honored in practical ways. She felt a mix of emotions. There was gratitude, yes, but also disbelief. She had never imagined that helping a shivering man could lead to something so impactful. She had done what she thought was right, and now it seemed the universe, in a quiet and unexpected way, had responded. The elderly man spoke again, his voice calm and deliberate. "I want you to know that this isn't about fame or reward. It's about ensuring that your generosity is recognized and that your cafe benefits from your character. You've created a space that is warm, welcoming, and compassionate. That's rare, and it deserves to be nurtured." She blinked back tears, feeling overwhelmed by the sincerity of his words. She had never thought of herself as extraordinary. She had just acted out of instinct and empathy, yet here she was being honored for it in a way she never expected. The team of assistants quietly began working with her, suggesting improvements and offering support, but never in a way that felt intrusive. They helped rearrange supplies, offered small upgrades to equipment, and provided tips on making the cafe more efficient. Every action was thoughtful, practical, and considerate of her needs and preferences. She realized that this was not just about gifts or resources. It was about guidance and empowerment, allowing her to continue her work with less struggle and more ease. Throughout the visit, the elderly man remained calm, observing everything with a gentle smile. He did not demand attention, did not lecture or patronize. His presence was reassuring, a quiet reminder that genuine care can be both powerful and unassuming. He explained that his approach was deliberate. He wanted her to feel supported, not pressured, and to understand the true value of her kindness. As the afternoon passed, she began to grasp the full significance of the visit. The man she had helped was not just anyone. He had influence and resources that could make a meaningful difference in her life and the life of her cafe. Yet, he had approached her with humility and respect, honoring her actions without making her feel indebted. It was a lesson in integrity, compassion, and human connection. He paused for a moment, looking around the cafe. "The world often overlooks the quiet acts of kindness that happen every day," he said. "People may not see them, but they create ripples that touch lives in ways we cannot always measure. You have created such a ripple, and I wanted you to understand its impact." She nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of his words. It was one thing to offer kindness. It was another to see its effects reach beyond immediate moments. She realized that her simple act had not only helped a man in need, but had also reminded someone of the importance of empathy and human connection. That understanding filled her with a sense of purpose and gratitude. The man spent some time talking about future plans to support the cafe in ways that would not disrupt her work or independence. He emphasized that everything would be done quietly and respectfully, ensuring that the cafe retained its character and warmth. She felt a deep sense of relief and comfort, knowing that his intentions were genuine and thoughtful. As the visit came to a close, he turned to her one last time. "Thank you for showing me the power of simple kindness. It's a lesson I will carry with me, and I hope it inspires you to continue bringing warmth to the people around you." She smiled, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. "I'll keep doing my best," she said softly. "I didn't know it could have such an impact." He nodded, his eyes reflecting a calm satisfaction. Without ceremony, he and his team prepared to leave. The staff and remaining customers watched, understanding that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The elderly man and his assistants departed, leaving the cafe filled with a renewed sense of purpose and warmth. She returned to her duties, arranging pastries, serving drinks, and helping customers, but the atmosphere had changed. The morning had transformed an ordinary cafe into a place where kindness, compassion, and human connection had been honored. She realized that true generosity does not seek recognition, but when it is acknowledged in the right way, it can create lasting impact. Throughout the rest of the day, she found herself reflecting on the visit. It was a reminder that small acts of care have power beyond immediate comprehension. They can inspire, influence, and create meaningful change, even in ways we cannot predict. The elderly man's quiet presence and thoughtful actions had turned a simple moment into a lesson that she would carry with her forever. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the windows, she looked around the cafe. The space felt more alive, more meaningful, and more connected. She understood now that her work, her kindness, and her dedication mattered. She had touched a life, and in turn, that life had touched hers in ways that words could not fully capture. And somewhere out there, the man she had helped continued his day, quietly carrying with him the reminder of how a simple act of care can create ripples that reach far beyond what anyone can see. The following morning, the cafe opened as usual. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries filled the air, and early customers trickled in to escape the chill outside. She moved behind the counter, arranging the pastries, wiping tables, and taking orders. Yet there was a quiet anticipation in the air she couldn't quite explain. She felt the memory of the previous day's visit lingering in her mind, a mixture of gratitude and wonder at what had happened. Outside, the same 3 black SUVs appeared again, drawing the attention of both staff and customers. The polished vehicles stopped directly in front of the cafe, their presence commanding attention. A few people outside paused, unsure of what was happening, while inside, everyone felt the subtle tension of anticipation. She took a deep breath, straightened her apron, and stepped toward the door as the elderly man and his assistants emerged. The man smiled warmly when he saw her. He was still modestly dressed, unassuming, yet carried a quiet presence that seemed to command respect without effort. "Good morning," he said softly. "I hope it's all right that I came again." She nodded, curiosity and a bit of nervousness showing in her eyes. "Of course," she said. "I wasn't expecting to see you so soon." He gestured for her to step outside, and as she did, she noticed the calm and efficiency of his assistants, who moved quietly, handling small boxes and items that had been packed in the SUVs. The man explained that he had arranged for a few practical improvements to support the cafe and her work, things that would make her daily routine easier and more enjoyable. But unlike yesterday, this visit felt even more personal, more intentional, as if it carried the weight of appreciation that went beyond material gifts. They began by entering the cafe together. The assistants placed equipment and supplies in thoughtful locations, rearranging certain areas to create a smoother workflow. There were small but meaningful upgrades, like improved storage, fresh utensils, and additional ingredients that would ensure the cafe could continue to run smoothly. Throughout it all, the elderly man spoke softly, explaining each detail without making her feel pressured or overwhelmed. His tone was calm, respectful, and sincere. She moved alongside him, watching as everything unfolded. Despite the magnitude of the gesture, he never acted superior or demanding. It was clear that he had come not to showcase his resources, but to honor her effort, her kindness, and her dedication. She realized that this was an expression of respect, a recognition of character that transcended material assistance. As the morning progressed, he spoke to her about the importance of genuine kindness. "You see," he said, "what you did yesterday was simple, yet it matters far more than you might imagine. Small acts of care, done without expectation, have a way of traveling farther than we can see. Your breakfast for a man in need reminded me of the power of compassion, and it's a lesson I wanted to honor." She listened intently, feeling a mixture of humility and awe. She had acted instinctively, simply wanting to help someone who seemed cold and tired. She had not imagined that her actions could create such ripples, touching someone's life in a profound way. And now, she was seeing that even quiet, unseen gestures could carry weight beyond comprehension. The assistants continued to organize and improve the cafe, always ensuring that her preferences and comfort were considered. They spoke respectfully, offered guidance when needed, and demonstrated a care for her work that was thoughtful and unobtrusive. It was evident that their purpose was to enhance the cafe and her experience without taking away her independence or control. Throughout the process, the elderly man remained close, observing quietly with a soft smile. He spoke occasionally, sharing reflections on kindness, humility, and the importance of nurturing spaces that foster genuine human connection. She felt inspired by his words, recognizing that they were lessons not about wealth or influence, but about the essence of meaningful living. Later, he guided her to a quiet corner of the cafe. There, he handed her a small notebook. Inside were notes, suggestions, and ideas to help improve the cafe, written carefully and respectfully. It was a guide, not a mandate, a way to offer support without overshadowing her creativity or independence. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the thoughtfulness and care embedded in every detail. He spoke once more, his voice calm and sincere. This is not about recognition or reward for yourself, but about acknowledging the character you've shown. It is rare to encounter someone who acts out of pure empathy and kindness, and that is worth honoring. The cafe you run, and the way you serve people embodies that same spirit. She nodded, tears threatening to fall, overwhelmed by the simplicity and significance of the gesture. Her small act of giving a meal to a shivering man had not only been noticed but respected and celebrated in a way that was deeply personal. She understood that this visit, and all that had come with it, was a quiet affirmation of the value of human connection and integrity. The elderly man and his assistants then spent some time discussing practical plans for the cafe, ensuring that her daily work would be smoother, more efficient, and more enjoyable. They were considerate, never imposing, always listening to her preferences. She realized that this was true support, action that respects the person it helps, rather than overshadowing or controlling them. As the day progressed, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The morning had transformed her understanding of kindness, responsibility, and the impact of small gestures. She realized that acts of care, even when unnoticed, create ripples that shape the world in profound ways. Her simple choice to give a meal to a man in need had become a catalyst for change, both in her life and in the lives of those around her. Before leaving, the elderly man spoke once more, his voice carrying a calm certainty. Remember, it is the small, genuine acts that leave lasting impressions. You have shown that true compassion is timeless, and your actions will continue to inspire. Keep your heart open, and continue creating warmth wherever you can. She nodded, feeling a deep sense of connection and understanding. I will, she replied softly, moved by the sincerity of his words. She realized that the value of her actions was not in the recognition, but in the impact they had on others, and in the lessons she had learned through them. The black SUVs departed quietly, leaving the cafe bathed in the soft glow of late morning sunlight. The staff and remaining customers returned to their routines, but the atmosphere was transformed. There was a sense of warmth, purpose, and meaning that lingered in the air, a subtle reminder of the extraordinary power of simple kindness. She returned to her work with renewed energy and a deeper understanding of her own capacity to make a difference. The events of the past days had shown her that genuine human connection, care, and empathy have the power to change lives in ways that cannot always be seen or measured. And somewhere beyond the street outside, the man she had helped walked with the quiet satisfaction of someone reminded that kindness still exists, and that it matters more than anything else.